Welcome Tarnished. Today we are going to cover a Faith Dex build, one that I have enjoyed quite a bit thus far. This is the Godslayer Blackflame, a build centered around using the Godskin Peeler as well as the Black Knife for a backup weapon, along with Godslayer Incantations. My stats are 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 22 Endurance to make sure we medium roll with our fashion plus our arsenal of choice, 17 Strength and 22 Dexterity, needed to wield the Peeler one-handed, and 65 Faith for our main damage output. This build is going to be broken down into two separate categories, PVE and PvP. The purpose of this build is to lean into the theme of Elden Ring's god-slaying abilities and weapons to take on our foes, whether it is the creatures in the lands between or a foul Tarnished seeking flames of ambition. I thought a lot about Godslayer Incantations during my first playthrough when I ran across the cellar in Stormveil Castle. It felt a little hidden for me, so if you do not know where the Godslayer seal or the tome is, I have it up on screen now. You'll take that tome back to the local roundtable bookworm Corin. After taking the tome back, he'll sell you 2 of the 5 Godslayer Incantations, Blackflame and Blackflame Blaidd, though only the Blackflame will be used in this build, seeing how our primary weapon has a flame affinity and is unable to be buffed. You'll need at least 1 stone sword key to unlock the room after roasting a few rats. You will be able to loot the items from a chest, so don't forget to stock up on at least 1 key before venturing forth to retrieve these items. The Godslayer's Seal. Boost all Godslayer Incantations by 10%, which is going to be our main focus when it comes to using incantations. At plus 25, it will have a D scaling in Strength and an S scaling in Faith. The minimal requirement to use this seal is 27 Faith. The incantations that are empowered by this seal are Black Flame, Blackflame Blaidd, Black Flame Ritual, Black Flame Protection, and Scouring Black Flame. We already excluded Black Flame Blaidd, but out of the 4 remaining, Black Flame Ritual along with Scouring Black Flame are going to be our most used, with Black Flame Ritual being the most important utility out of the 4. Black Flame Ritual summons a circle of black flame pillars around the caster. It is not the fastest incantation, or the highest damaging one, but when charged it increases the size of the circle. You can use this in a few ways, spacing and setup for Black Flame Tornado, another Godslayer Incantation, or Blade of Death. It is also good for keeping enemies at bay in PvE, staggering most enemy types and afflicting them with a burn for a little over 2 seconds. It is located in a Spirit Caller cave in the eastern part of the mountaintops of Giants. Our second incantation is Scouring Black Flame. It is a wide wave in front of the caster that spews bellowing black flames forward. Charging enhances the range of the attack. It also does the same type of burn that other black flame incantations seem to have. Great for packs of enemies or dealing with big targets that might sidestep your normal black flame. In PvP, it is useful when free casting to predict where your opponents will go. Charging it can mix up timings to catch someone off guard. You get this for killing the Godskin Apostle located at the Windmill Village, north of the Altus Plateau. He also drops the Godskin Peeler. Our final offensive incantation is Black Flame. Black Flame is our most simple yet effective incantation. Throw a ball of raging black fire. Pretty basic, right? While it also shares the same burn properties, the charge effect changes how the spell works just enough that it can be played around with for different results. Charging Black Flame causes the incantation to explode. In PvE, that can hit multiple targets. In PvP, it can be used to catch someone without actually directly hitting them. The damage is nice, and it is the highest damaging incantation per FP cost to cast that we have. Lastly, the defensive Black Flame Protection summons a black fire within, increasing physical damage negation, but impairing Sacred Flask and other forms of HP restoration. The damage negation increases 35%, and the healing reduction is 20%. It lasts a solid 70 seconds before it needs to be reapplied. I use this when I'm going up against a Colossal Greatsword or other hard-hitting physical weapon. In PvE, I fit this in when I go exploring mid-game catacombs. I had good luck there, especially with how dangerous those places could be. Received from Gideon Ofnir after talking to him about the secret medallions once you've obtained both Haligtree secret medallion, or after defeating him, of course. You can purchase it from the Twin Maidens at the round table. Now we take a look at the weapons, the Godskin Peeler and the Black Knife. The Godskin Peeler, an absolute unit of a twin blade. I have mine with the flame affinity for faith scaling and using the Black Flame Tornado Flame Art to keep the theme of the build, and also since it's the same as what comes with the weapon itself. As mentioned earlier in the video, it is found at the Windmill Village after slaying the Godskin Apostle. At 25, standard with no affinity, the Godskin Peeler has a D scaling in Strength and a B scaling in Dex with an attack power rating of 620. But with the flame affinity, that changes the scaling and damage from just physical to physical and fire split damage. The scaling then turns to an E in strength and a D in dexterity, but adds C scaling in faith, which improves our damage a bit since we're primarily a faith build. Let's start with the movesets and their variants. Firstly, the R1s or light attacks. That one-handed R1 combo is basic with an average attack speed. Each swing slashes in front of you, hitting the target one time per attack. The two-handed moveset is where the twin blades differ from spears and halberd class weapons. The R1 can really dish out a good amount of damage, since the first two attacks hit twice, followed by a horizontal slash, then back to two more attacks that also hit twice. That is a total of 9 hits in one combo. The damage is pretty high if you can manage to finish it. The one-handed heavy attack, or the R2, isn't actually that bad of an option if you're caught with your seal out in your offhand. The first swing is a medium poke followed by a vertical slam. I use this on occasions whenever I'm switching from incantations and melee. The two-handed R2 attack has two separate properties. The non-charged variant itself only does a lunging stab forward with both attacks. The charged variant does an initial spin before the stab on each attack. Both can knock back smaller enemies and break the guard of most. It does high damage but with a bigger risk of being attacked. The one-handed jumping attack consists of a downward slash with a light attack and a plunging attack on the heavy. I really wouldn't recommend doing one-handed jumping attacks, but they aren't useless. The two-handed jump attack is the same as the one-handed variant. Nothing really special about it other than more damage. It is a safe option nonetheless. The one-handed running attacks are quite potent in chasing down foes. It has good reach, and at the start of the attack your character takes an extra step forward to thrust. The heavy variant swings the weapon up and around to thrust with the rear end of the peeler. The motion on the attack consists of 2 hits. The two-handed R1 does a 3-hit attack upwards. It doesn't have the reach of the one-handed R1, but can deal significant damage in comparison. The heavy variant also hits 3 times with an overhead spinning slash into a medium range stab. This is another option for catching fleeing targets. Now to the Ash of War. The Blackflame Tornado Ash of War is a slow but high damaging windup that burns the target in a ravenous storm of black fire. It does really high damage, upwards of 2000 on a full attack, not counting Physic Flask for fire damage. With the Shard of Alexander, it hits incredibly hard, shredding most bosses and enemies if you can complete it without getting punished. Good to use if you're a fan of spirit summons or co-op. Most enemies will be staggered during the animation, and once the attack finishes will be knocked into the air. It is good to note that you can cancel the attack with a dodge if you find yourself a bit out of position from an enemy. Next is the Black Knife. This weapon is our secondary in all aspects of combat, but our primary for engaging. Most of the time you're going to get in a sneaky backstab. But what makes this weapon even better is that the Ash of War also benefits from sneak attacks. So while it might not deal a high damaging visceral attack from a backstab, it allows you to really get in not only the damage, but the unique health reduction and the drain from the weapon. At plus 10, the Black Knife has an AR of 464 with a physical and holy split damage. Its scaling is E in strength, B in dex, and C in faith. The stat required to use the dagger is relatively low, with 8 strength, 12 dex, and 18 faith. It is important to note that the projectile on the Black Knife is 100% holy damage, so keep that in mind. The Black Knife can be obtained after defeating the Black Knife Assassin at the entrance of the Sainted Hero's grave in the Altius Plateau, directly west of the Rampart side Path of Grace. The one-handed and two-handed R1s are basic, just some forward slashes that deal decent damage. The dagger itself can be wielded as so, and it isn't a bad idea to two-hand the dagger if you want some faster pokes against quicker targets. The heavy one-handed attack does 2 double slashes forward. Again, nothing special, it is akin to the two-handed variant as well, but when charged they both have a final lunging slash forward that does moderate damage. The jumping attack variants are both extremely similar, just damage difference. The R1 comes out as a horizontal slash on both attacks, and the heavy is a downward slash. Very basic but quick nonetheless. The running attack on both the one-handed variant and the two-handed are again similar, yet the heavy running attack does a lunging stab, which just like the peeler could be used to chase down foes or get a quick stab in after evading an attack. It comes out fast and can be recovered quickly from. As you can see, the Black Knife really shines with its Ash of War. Speaking of the Ash of War, the Black Knife holds the Blade of Death. The Blade of Death unleashes a powerful blade-like projectile. It does immediate damage, but in addition to that, it reduces the enemy's maximum HP by 10% for 15 seconds, and saps the life from targets for 5 seconds. The skill itself costs 25 FP and isn't chargeable. The range is about that of a normal incantation or sorcery. The damage on the Ash of War scales with Faith, being holy. It can be improved by mixing the Holy Shrouding Cracked Tear in your Physic Flask, as well as the Sacred Scorpion Charm if you so decide to opt out of using one of the recommended charms for this build. Now that the basics are covered, we're going to cut into the final parts of the video, seeing the weapons in action in both PvE and PvP, as well as explaining the differences in talisman setups as well as the Physic Flask mixtures. If you made it this far, do me a favor and like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. Even one of those things can go a long way and will keep you up to date with newer videos that I create. But enough of that, let's get into it. You are the Godslayer, taking down powerful foes with your black flames of death. What you just saw was a glimpse of the destruction that you can bring forth upon the lands in between. Your loadout only really changes depending on what kind of boss encounter you have and what you feel comfortable with. The talismans I recommend for this build for PvE are Carrion Filigreed Crest, which lowers the FP cost of skills by 25%. This is purchased from War Counselor EG as part of the Best Boys questline. This goes hand in hand with arguably the most powerful talisman in the game, Shard of Alexander. The shard boosts attack power of all skills by 15%. Get this for completing his questline. If for some reason you can't quite do that on your first run, you can opt to use the Warrior Jar Shard, which boosts skills by 10%, which you get from killing him without completing his questline. I recommend holding off for the extra 5%, since everything stacks multiplicatively. Next talisman is the Erdtree's Favor. This is essentially the Ring of Favor and Protection from Dark Souls, increasing HP, stamina, and equip load. The difference between the ranks are on the screen now. You can find the basic version in the Fringe Folk Hero's grave, behind a double imp keystone wall. The +2 is located in Leyndell, Ashen Capital, and can only be accessed near endgame. It is guarded by 3 lesser ulcerated tree spirits. You can avoid these guys by hugging the left wall. Lastly, we have the interchangeable slot, which can house a few talismans depending on your approach. I personally like to equip the Twin Blade talisman for my attack chains on the Godskin Peeler by 20%. But if you're having issues with landing full combos and you would much prefer to kite with a black knife, then you can instead switch out the Twin Blade talisman for the Sacred Scorpion Charm, which increases holy damage done by 12%, but increases physical damage taken by 10. While not a big deal in most cases, you might find yourself taking a bit too much damage if you're trying to play aggressive with the peeler or the knife. Remember, buffs stack multiplicatively. So this does work in tandem with the Holy Shrouded Cracked Tear for the flask. This is dropped by the NPC invader Anastasia, Tarnished Eater, in her invasion spot in the Smoldering Church in Caelid. For my Wondrous Physic Flask, I use the Holy Shrouding Cracked Tear, which increases holy damage by 20% in PvE. It lasts for a solid 3 whole minutes, which gives you plenty of time for high damaging Blade of Death flurries from your knife. You get this tier from slaying the Erdtree avatar in the northeastern Liurnia. The second mixture I like to use is the Flame Shrouding Cracked Tear, which does the same thing as the Holy variant, but instead for fire. That in turn affects all your fire damage, including incantations, which stacks with your Godslayer seal. It is a noticeable amount, especially including the fire damage on the flame affinity, Godskin Peeler. It can be found at the Erd tree directly east of the Smoldering Church. Though if you feel you are too squishy, then swap out one of the damaging tiers with the Crimson Bubble tier against enemies that deal physical damage. This tier restores 30% max HP when your health is at or lower than 20%. Effects last for 3 minutes or when HP restoration triggers, so keep that in mind. It can be found at the mountaintops of giants after killing the Erd tree avatar. However, if you're against magic damage enemies or bosses, I suggest taking the Crimson Whirl Bubble tier, which restores 5% max HP when hit for 15 seconds. It only works for non-physical attacks and damage. It is located here in the mountaintops of giants. Remember that you have an entire arsenal of life-burning black flames, as well as 2 really powerful weapons. If used with each other, you will be a force to be reckoned with in the lands between. Between duels and invasions, your playstyle changes drastically on how you use your arsenal. One thing to note is the dagger is, in my experience, used much more during duels and invasions, while my Blackflame Tornado seems to be much more powerful versus ganks and aggressive players. The talisman setup I picked for duels and invasions are Carrion Filigree Crest, which lowers the FP cost of skills by 25%. This is purchased from War Counselor EG as part of Best Boys questline. This goes hand in hand with arguably the most broken talisman in the game, Shard of Alexander. The shard boosts attack power of all skills by 15%. Get this for completing his questline. If for some reason you want to skip his questline, you can opt to use the Warrior Draw shard, which boosts skills by 10%, which you get from killing him without completing his quest. I highly recommend holding off for the extra 5% since everything stacks multiplicatively in Elden Ring. This talisman is absolutely the maker and breaker of builds. It makes moderately good Ashes of War become completely devastating forces of destruction. Something so simple like Giant Hunt could eradicate a poor unsuspecting Tarnished in seconds. That means our Black Flame Tornado will almost be a one-shot even without our flask on, dealing upwards to 1900 damage on a complete attack with the Ash of War. It also applies our Little Knife of Death, causing each blade to hit the target from anywhere between 700 to 800 damage. And if you really wanted to maximize the damage, you could throw in the Flame Shrouded Mixture, which we'll get into in a moment. The third talisman is the Erd Tree's Favor. This is essentially the Ring of Favor and Protection from Dark Souls, increasing HP, stamina, and equip load. The difference between the ranks are on the screen now. You can find the basic version in the Fringe Folk's Hero Grave behind a double imp keystone wall. The +2 version is located in the Endel, Ashen Capital, and can only be accessed near end game. It is guarded by 3 lesser ulcerated tree spirits. You can avoid these guys just by hugging the left wall. And our last talisman is the Crimson Amber Medallion +2, which raises max HP by 8%, compared to the base medallion, which is 6. The +2 version can be found once Liandel becomes Ash. You can find it down the center sewer hole. Just be careful for the fall. I really don't swap these as much, seeing how HP pools in this game have to be higher to withstand all the massive damage from stacking effects. But if you feel confident, you could swap the Crimson Medallion for the Dagger Talisman for sneaky parries with the Buckler. You can use the Golden Parry on it, or my favorite, Carrying Retaliation. Spellcasters are my bane in this game, so I try to make up my weaknesses with utility. For my Physic Flask, I like to use the Crimson Bubble tier against enemies that deal more physical damage. This tier restores 30% of max HP when your health is at or lower than 20%. Effect lasts for 3 minutes, or when HP restoration triggers, so keep that in mind. It can be found at the mountaintops of giants after killing an Erd Tree avatar. Or alternatively, against spellcasters, the Crimson Whirl Bubble tier, which restores 5% max HP when hit for 15 seconds. It only works for non-physical attacks and damage. It is located here in the mountaintops of giants. The second mixture I like to use is the Flame Shroud and Crack tier, which does the same thing as the Holy variant does, but instead for fire. That in turn affects all of your fire damage, including incantations with stacks with your Godslayer's Steel. It's a noticeable amount, especially including the flame damage on the flame affinity Godskin Peeler. In PvP, you can dance around your enemies with your incantations for setups, as well as utilizing the Black Knife for trades or the Punish healing. One tip I learned with the Peeler is to purposely whiff a jumping attack, and while you're hitting the ground, start the Ash of War. I don't know what it is about some people, but they like to try to punish that, and if you're in the animation of the attack, it will catch them 90% of the time. While not the strongest build, it is still just as fun. Hey guys, this build isn't meant to be meta, but I still hope you enjoyed the video nonetheless. I love to put together themed builds and restrict myself to a certain playstyle that fits a character. I implore you to give this Godslayer Blackflame a try. Let me know in the comments if you have an idea for a themed build you'd like me to make or try. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to see whenever I release another video. Thanks for watching guys, and have a good one.